Welcome to another episode of The Artsy Raven, a show about writing and publishing with your host, J.F. Garrard.
Welcome to another episode of the Artsy Raven. So today we have a special guest, Lindsay Wong. So Lindsay, we did interview her in episode 30 in What Happens After Writing a Bestseller. So you can always look back to episode 30 for more of her origin story, I guess. So today's episode will talk more about her new book. Now, Lindsay is the author of the critically acclaimed, award-winning, and best-selling memoir, The Woo Woo, which was a finalist for Canada Reads 2019. She's written a YA novel entitled My Summer of Love and Misfortune, and Tell Me Pleasant Things About Immortality, her acclaimed collection of short stories. Wong holds a BFA in creative writing from the University of British Columbia and an MFA in literary nonfiction for Columbia University. And she currently teaches creative writing at the University of Winnipeg. So welcome, Lindsay.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be back again.
Okay, what else can we talk about this time?
Yeah.
Now, you have an exciting new book coming out called Villain Hitting for Vicious Little Nobodies. Now, sounds like such a crazy title and it's in all caps. So tell me a little bit about what's this book about?
So this book is about Lucinda Lowe, who's this disgraced MFA student. She just can't get published, and in so many ways, she goes about life. And I think a lot of people who go to MFA programs, people who are trying to create art and feeling like they have failed, are going to relate. So she starts to think of herself as this modern day loser. And so the title, the idea of being a vicious little nobody, like what do you do when you have no life choices, but to get kind of mean? And villain hitting, for those people who might not be familiar, is this Chinese folk sorcery. I don't know, JF, if you've been to Hong Kong and under Causeway Bay, you get to see all these old aunties
Yeah.
sitting under the bridge holding shoes, and you can pay them to curse your enemies or restore blessings. And so this is what Lucinda does. I mean, she's also from a family with villain hitters. And so
Oh,
villain hitting for vicious little nobodies came to be. So it's a lot of female rage, a lot of getting back at people who've hurt you.
oh, okay. I didn't realize it was called villain hitting. I guess I always heard about the term in Chinese, so I never realized. Like when I describe it to people, I'm not sure what else to say except you're paying an old lady to hit someone with a shoe. So,
It's like Chinese voodoo, right? It's kind of fun and silly, but also kind of scary, right? Because you have people actually going to these old ladies and being
mhm.
like, here's $30. Can you curse my boss?
And it's usually old ladies. I don't think I've ever seen an old man do it. I don't
Oh,
know.
you're right. You're right. But is it gendered, or is it, I mean, I'm sure men can do it too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So cool. Okay, so does the book explore villainy like through this character? Is that the intention, or are the villains, are they the good people or the bad people?
I think in this book, being a villain, it's sort of this morally gray area because all the characters, Lucinda, for example, she does some really bad things, but at the same time, in her mind, she feels justified doing it. And then her grandmother, her mama, is a villain hitter, and she's being paid by all these people to send curses out into the world. And I guess, she is making people fall to their deaths. And then I guess in some ways she's also a villain, but she also really just loves her grandchildren. So um, in a way, I think it's really up to the reader to interpret what is a villain. But at the same time, there's a lot of intergenerational trauma. Lucinda's grandmother, for example, she lives through World War II. There was like a Battle of Hong Kong in the 1940s, and she has this really violent filled past, right? And that makes her a really hard person sometimes to live with. And so you get to sort of see these characters who are both, very tender with each other, but they can be also really, really cruel. So it's that complication, I think. So are we all villains sometimes? I know you introduced me my origin story, and that made me sound like a villain. I'm like a
No, she's
literary
not.
villain.
Yeah, I know. Okay. Now where is this book set? Is it North America or in Asia?
So the book goes back and forth. So we
Okay.
have Lucinda. She was born in Richmond, and then and then she ends up coming back to Vancouver as an adult. She does her MFA program in New York. So we have, the North American setting, and then her grandmother. We go from China to Hong Kong, and then also Lucinda ends up back in China. So what happens in the book is that she ends up trying to save her grandmother and sister by becoming a corpse spouse. So Ming Hoon, like corpse marriage is also explored in the book. So yeah, there's a lot of themes going on. And she ends up selling her body to as a corpse to Joyful Coffin and Co., which is in a cave in China. So this book is set everywhere. It's
Oh,
a global
wow.
book.
Okay. I do like morbid topics, so I will have a read when it comes out next year. Now, um, what was the hardest part about writing this book?
I would say, from a craft point of view, there were so many characters. We have Lucinda, right, which I do in first person, the grandmother, Bochai, which is in third person. There's also a spirit who comes to inhabit the sister, and that's also done in third person. So it was sort of balancing all these perspectives and trying to weave them together, go back and forth through time. And I remember my editor asking, well, how do we connect these all these stories together, right? How do we, put them in? And I remember being like, well, but they're related because, she's her grandmother. And I think from a story point of view, it's about making sure the plot goes forward. So that was probably the hardest challenge, and just being able, I think, to change voices. I don't know about you, but when I'm writing, sometimes I just I leave something and I come back to it and I can't get the voice back, or it takes me a while to kind of get reoriented to the character. And so it was sort of like juggling these voices, weaving everything back and forth. And I think I always joke that I write my books under duress, because when I come back to it, I don't remember.
Okay. Now, this book sounds like there's a lot of cultural aspects. Was it difficult to sell to your editor or publisher that might not necessarily understand some of the, um, I guess, nuanced references in it, or?
I was very fortunate that my editor, this was part of a 2-book deal of my short story
Ah,
collection.
okay.
And she really understood what I was going through. She was very
Okay.
careful. She asked me questions. I did also did a lot of research. I went to Hong Kong and I was watching all the aunties, hit their photos, and people were lining up. Um, and so it was sort of that, and then the research as well. So um, but I guess I think it can be really difficult for BIPOC writers to sell their books if you're writing about cultural aspects and not having readers understand. And in the book, I kind of reference that because Lucinda, in some ways, it's sort of meta, because she's sort of like this failed MFA student, and she's being told she has to write certain topics, right? Or publishing won't publish her. And I think that happens to a lot of BIPOC writers. If you're writing about things that white mainstream readers don't understand, you're told to explain it, or you have to do it in a way that makes sense to them, right? So if you're writing about trauma and you decide to approach it in a funny lens, then they're sort of like, well, why would you do this, right? And so there are all these footnotes in Villain Hitting, and you get to see her jokes and her sides, and so it's like a little bit of some inside jokes with the BIPOC community. So if you read the footnotes, you'll get to see that insight.
Now, what do you hope your readers like? Are there any particular themes you hope the readers take away from the book?
I think I really wanted to write about capitalism and who gets to write in this sort of society where, we're defined so much by how much we produce, whether or not we have a monetary value to something. And so it questions a lot about our expectations on Asian Canadians, especially Asian Canadian females. And I think there's like one part in the book when Lucinda questions like her own worth, and she realizes that she's worth, she's more worth dead than alive when she sells herself as a corpse spouse. So there's all these sorts of things about patriarchy, capitalism, and our societal expectations about Asian women. We're supposed to be obedient, meek, and what happens if we aren't? What happens if we have we come from families that don't support us, and we enter these elite spaces in an MFA program at Columbia, for example, and we don't know how to conform, and our writing doesn't conform with expectations. So it's where everything is sort of stacked against you as an Asian female.
Now, okay, let's shift the topic a little bit about, I guess, cultural context and representation. I mean, as an Asian writer, I think you're one of the more prominent ones. Like, since the Woo Woo came out, have you felt any pressure as a writer?
Pressure from readers or pressure from
Oh, I guess from readers or maybe even from like the publishing houses you have to deal with. Like, is there certain expectations set for you, do you feel?
I feel that there's always this for readers, when you're a person of color and you're publishing, writing about your community, you're going to either get people who support you and people who have a lot of criticism. To this day, I still get hate mail from the woo woo for the woo
Oh
woo.
no!
And there's like sometimes people will even change their names and have, fake email addresses, right? They go through those links just to send me a hate message from a book that was written in 2018, right? And
Yeah, it's
so
been a while. Yeah.
it shows the absurdity, but also that it's made a lasting impression, because if you're writing about topics that you're not supposed to be writing about, or you're doing it in a way that's not expected of you, it's going to anger a lot of people. And so it causes that division. And then in terms of, I guess, writing, I've always wanted to write about Asian characters, because I think, we are underrepresented in writing, right? And so it just feels very strange to me not to write from my own point of view. And I've not gotten that from my agent or my editor. I've never been told you need to write a certain way. But when my agent was sending things out to the market, right, especially to the US market, there's always this that sense like you're not accessible enough by other editors. You're not relatable, you're not mainstream enough. And that's really white coded language, I think, for people being like, what is this culture? We don't understand it, right? Because a lot of contemporary Asian writers, we're not writing the Joy Luck Club, right? We're writing,
Yes.
going darker. We're innovating, I think. And it's not to say that the Joy Luck Club isn't a really fundamental and important text in the Asian diaspora canyon, right? It's really just it it really is a time and place. And so I think, we in the 21st century, contemporary Asian writing is moving more away from that, right? But we're also paying homage to our roots.
Yeah, I feel like that, like it seems like, before there was all these stories about immigration, right? Most of the books about Asian people about immigration, and
We're all
there's a lot. I'm
suffering,
not saying they
right?
didn't suffer. Of course they suffered, but like
Yeah.
in a way, like, we're more than that, and we like to move beyond that. Yes, we suffered. Now let's move on to our next thing. Yeah. So I feel like probably yeah, speculative fiction and whatnot. Like those are the next frontiers in a way. Because I remember talking to Jim Wong Chu back in the day. Oh gosh, this was like in 2015, 2016, and he was saying, he's like, okay, the next frontier for Asian people is like, let's explore fantasy and horror and all these other genres that we haven't been able to touch. So,
Mhm.
okay.
And it is a perfect metaphor, right? I think fantasy and horror for immigration and other really serious topics that are affecting Asian Canadian writers, and right. But I think a lot of readers, mainstream readers, are sort of taken aback by it, right? They're like, we don't understand this. And there's always that double expectations of when one is reading BIPOC writers, right?
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, the first book that I wrote, it's a East Meets West vampire book called
Mhm.
Undead Sorcerers. I never found a publisher because they were all like vampires or European, and I was like, no, there's Asian vampires too, and
They
I just
hawk,
I
right?
couldn't, yeah. So then I self-published the thing, right? And some
Mhm.
people asked me, oh, you just ruined your debut author thing. I was like, oh, whatever. No one was ever gonna publish it except for me, so it's okay. I'm fine. So.
That sounds amazing, though. I love that you're writing about Asian vampires.
Well, a lot of my stuff is Eats Meets West, so I do understand it is hard to sell because sometimes I feel like a lot of the Asian books are like there's not that much mixing, but that's the reality I grew up with, right? So I mean, I'm in a mixed race marriage, and like I would lived in a society like my family was half Buddhist, half Roman Catholic, like everything's sort of a mixture for me. So that's the stuff I write about. That, but people just find it's hard to pin into a nice category. Like I understand at the same time the marketing people's like dilemma, but it's all about risk taking, right? And it's a business at the end of the day, a lot of publishing. So, if they don't think it's going to work, they're not going to, throw money at it. So
Mhm.
that's
And a
okay.
lot of, I think, unfortunately, a lot of publishers are white, middle class,
Mhm.
um, university educated, and so it's we don't really have a lot of BIPOC writers who are willing to take that chance on marginalized writers.
Yeah, I was talking to someone who was thinking about working in the publishing industry, but
Mhm.
she was like, "Oh, but you're not going to make much money." So you need someone to support you. Like it's not enough income for her. As much as she wants to go work in the publishing industry, she's just like, it's not worth it. So,
No, yeah, that's a difficulty, right? You kind of need to have family funding or a partner if you want to pursue this sort of career, and so it's limiting, right? It's so hard to find like a
the
BIPOC
secret in life
editor.
is to be born into a rich family. Maybe in my next life. We'll see. But okay, let's talk a little bit about what's your writing like these days? Like, do you have a habit? Your writing process, has it changed over the years?
It kind of has. I think when I was not really now I teach a lot, and so when I was not, I was sort of freelancing. I would sort of just write anywhere. It was kind of random whenever I felt like it. Now it's more planned because there's some days I just can't get any writing done. With Villain Hitting, I ended up writing between 12 and 4 in the morning. It was
Oh,
suddenly like my brain just woke up. I don't
yeah.
know, maybe during the day I was doing admin work, I was
Mhm.
teaching, and I was being, pleasant and presentable. But at nighttime, it was like so quiet and I could hear myself think and the words just came out. So that's sort of my go-to now, like writing in the middle of the night. I don't know why.
Okay. Now, do you usually outline, or are you a plotter, a pantser, or whatever?
I tried to do sort of like a very rough outline so I know what's
Mhm.
happening, but it didn't quite work for this book. I found myself going halfway through and I didn't know what was happening, so I ended up describing too much. I was describing the world, I was kind of repeating myself, and my editor was like, "Okay, we need to kind of keep the plot moving." And I was like, "Yeah, yeah, I completely agree." So I think going back, I would really just start thinking about my middle. For future books and just at least have an idea. That's what, as I tell my students, I feel like with this one, I was like, yeah, I know what I'm doing. And I was so excited. I wrote halfway. I was like, oh, now I'm like just describing the world because what do I do next?
Okay, cool. Now, what makes a character come alive for you? Like, do you do character sketches, or as you write, do you discover who they are?
I think for me, when I'm writing, I'm discovering who they are. I don't really do character sketches in advance. But I'm always thinking about like, would I want to run away from this person? Right. Because I think those people are really interesting. Right. Having that discomfort on the page, someone who's fascinating. We can't look away. But at the same time, do we want to actually talk to them? Right. So it's like having that almost unlikable character. That's really interesting to me, right? The differences, or that moral gray area, I think.
Okay, now what's the best writing advice you've ever received?
Oh gosh, I don't know if I've ever received any good writing
Okay,
advice because it never applies.
what, what, okay, how about what's the advice you give to your students then?
I always say, write where you shouldn't go.
Hmm.
That's what I tell them. So I don't know if it's good advice though, but it's interesting advice.
Okay. Now, how do you handle self-doubt or fear that the work isn't good enough?
That's a really hard question because I think I always grapple with self-doubt, and I think a lot of writers do. And for me, it's really about just pushing through. I have to tell myself like it doesn't have to be perfect; it has to just be good enough. And that's something I do also tell my students. And it's for me, it's just like, okay, now it's time to stop editing and hit send, right? It's like you have to actually force yourself to do it, right? It's a lot of pep talks, I think. Self-pep talks.
Now, is this book a standalone or are you writing a sequel? Like, what's the next thing you're working on?
Oh, this is intended to be a standalone novel. I just started a novel as well, but it also takes place in China, but it's about, cults and I guess curses. So again, I guess I'm hanging out in the horror genre. Just something about it, I think that really pulls me in, and I can just say so much more in speculative fiction than I can in real life. But maybe my process is a bit weird because I do like to draw on things that have happened in my life and people that I know, and kind of just steal here and there, and just kind of create a world around it.
Lindsay, you're going to do a reading for us. Can you give us a bit of context and then you can start reading?
Great, thanks so much. I'm going to read the first few pages of Villain Hitting for Vicious Little Nobodies, and I'll start with a dedication. For every idiot, you know who you are, who inconvenienced, frustrated, or impeded me in some way. May someone, not me, curse you with a shoe. This book is also dedicated to everyone who's felt the rough sting of being a nobody, the pleasantness of reality after being jostled from a pretty dream that simply wasn't meant for you. Part 1, Brain Emotion. So and so, beloved son, I hereby inform you, you died at a young age and thus did not realize the great principle of marriage. You sleep alone in the dark world and lack the intimacy of man and woman. Just as living people long for companionship, the dead fear loneliness as well. Unexpectedly, so and so's family had a daughter who just passed away like an autumn leaf. We sent a betrothal for you so your souls might meet. We selected a suspicious day for the rite of your union. We also set out an offering next to your shrine tablet, furnished with all kinds of food. Please send your spirit down to the banquet and eat the meal. Guide to Afterlife Marriage Proposal Letter. Lochinda, Guochao Province, southwestern China, present day. Exactly 26 hours after we signed the contract, we practiced dying together, in caskets the color of wholesome baby teeth. Never mind their affordable luxury ones with barely acceptable breathing holes inside them. There's a silk pillow that makes our heads appear bulbous. A lovely purple sedative dissolved under the tongue is recommended for our first time. I suppose it is not without kindness that they take our elbows and wrists and lead us with exaggerated solemnity, arrange for us in alphabetical order. Here lie our ordinary sized 84 times 28 times 23 coffins, row by row, waiting for us former nobodies to stretch supine in them, eyes open or closed. Off we glide, dead-eyed mouth freezers and poorly postured deadbeats of our generation, escorted to our assigned coffins in a damp concrete theater. I mean, it is not without kindness that they must treat us like prize goats in petting zoos, to be coaxed, fed, and groomed into immaculate corpse spouses. Let us help you, the matchmakers coo, patting our shoulders and forearms stippled with small goose pimples, whether from cold or deathly anticipation. Softly, they usher us each to the coffin with our headshot placed on the lid and give us a moment to revel or mourn our life choices. Before opening the casket, ta-da, before helping us step in, look, our guides hand us a stingy bouquet of half-wilted flowers, most likely plucked by a peasant with calloused fingers from some mountainside in China. Welcome, welcome to your new abode, they murmur. Congratulations on accepting the afterlife, dead dears. Since we are broken, squashed by economies without status or money, hope-fed and gutted by stories of everyone else's successes, to be told that we have a second chance feels sweetly glittering, if bitterly overwhelming. I suppose it's actually pragmatic, not kind, that our guides demonstrate the proper method of solo coffin dwelling before permanent partnering. They introduce themselves as uncles and aunties of love death, ask us if we're comfortable, and offer us a light but nutritious snack before coffin practice begins. They tell us that we should be serious, sad, non-smiling, shoulders back, because we're sleeping beauties, proper corpse spouses. Maybe it's classist, elitist so, for them to assume we don't know the solemn rituals of dying. It's condescending of them to think we have not experienced at least a semblance of loss, a little bonbon of tragedy. that we don't understand what it is we've signed up for. Don't be afraid, they murmur to us, staring lovingly at our person-sized boxes, arranging our bodies like well-meaning massage therapists, head more to middle, arm position 35 degrees to prevent cramping, relaxed face, unsmile please. They want us to take a photo to commemorate this moment, so out of obligation, we say, yeah, okay, and shut our eyes. But then they, not without kindness, slam the lids and lock us in. For your safekeeping, the matchmakers murmur in tender voices. We cry out with shock. Some of us yelp from instinct. It is a solemn, unfunny thing to lie unburied in the semi-darkness in a locked box for employment purposes. But what did we expect? In our previous world, goodwill and help accompanied sinister betrayals. Shush, the matchmakers say, as if astonished when we bang on the insides of our boxes and shout obscenities that would make us regretful under even normal circumstances. They whisper shout, dead wives and dead husbands do not make complaining noises. If someone had told me that I'd married to a corpse by the age of 30, I would have laughed and said it was just an urban legend that Chinese parents told their children to scare them into heteronormative marriage and carrying on the family line. Marry well, or you will not be allowed in the family tomb, they told us, threatening us with permanent exile. Everyone will be buried together, and you will have to lie underground alone, far, far away. So sad, so lonely, so bad, a shame. If someone had told me that my fate was to end up as a broke, desperate, mildly wrinkled, unable to afford Botox millennial, I would call them a jealous hag auntie and spit into their $15 glass of Chardonnay. Yeah, right, I'd probably say, not entirely caring that I was talking back to my elders, and then feel ashamed. Thanks so much.
Well, thank you, Lindsay, for spending time with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
The Artsy Raven is produced by Dark Helix Press. Introduction voiceover by Chris Gorman. Music by Tim Moore. Please access your bonus content on the Patreon website. Thank you very much for listening, and please stay safe.